It's the winter of 2015, and it's a bitter cold day in Charleston, West Virginia. The night before, it was also butt-ass cold when my car broke down and needed to be towed to a mechanic. The mechanic just called, and they've made the repair, and my friend Ann Kelly is driving me to pick it up. All right, one question I have to ask. Do you pee sitting down or standing up? Now, I completely understand that this may seem like a rude question to ask a woman who is kindly taking time out of her day to help me out. But you have to understand that Ann is a male-to-female transsexual. When we spoke back in 2015, she was still in the early stages of her transition.
I pee sitting down. Absolutely. And, it's funny, obviously using a, well, maybe not so obvious. When I'm out, I use the proper restroom for me, which is the women's bathroom. But
we'd spent many hours on this day talking about all of the changes that Ann was experiencing. And frankly, I was experiencing a lot of changes too, because before Ann, I'd never spent much time with a transgender person. At the time of this conversation, Ann hadn't undergone surgery and still had her male equipment.
Even if I wanted to, just out of the sake of convenience, just pee standing up, the reality is, given my height, that, my head extends well beyond the top of any given stall. So
Ann is 6'4".
I don't need to be in a women's bathroom and have, other women in there that may question who or what or my motives or any of that stuff. I just want to fit in and be just like any other woman, so I sit down when I pee.
Do you get any pushback from people? They sense that you're transgender, or that you possibly might be a cross-dresser, or somebody that should not be in the female restroom. I mean, have you had any people call you out on that?
I haven't been called out per se on it, but I will say that everybody takes using the bathroom, a public bathroom, for granted. And when I first started using the women's bathroom, it was hard. It was really, really hard because, here I was knowing that, people could read me. They could tell that, I was dressed up or wearing a wig or any of that other stuff, but that was part of the vulnerability and exposure of it, and just feeling like, oh my God, there's a certain just sanctity to the bathroom, that one doesn't violate. And not that I felt like I was violating it, but I didn't want and don't want others to think that I'm violating it. So in the beginning, I was really
the sanctity of the bathroom. Since my conversation with Ann, this subject has stirred a lot of emotions for people in America. In 2016, North Carolina passed HB 2, a law requiring people to use the bathroom that corresponds with the gender on their birth certificate. This law forces a person like Ann to use the men's room. Now, this law has triggered boycotts. Rock stars like Bruce Springsteen have canceled concerts. The NCAA has pulled from the Tar Heel State lucrative rounds from their March Madness men's basketball championship. The Associated Press projects that North Carolina stands to lose nearly $4 billion in revenue. Just last week, a year after the law was passed, North Carolina lawmakers passed new legislation that repeals HB 2. But critics argue this new law continues to discriminate because it doesn't allow any of North Carolina's towns or cities to pass any non-discrimination protections for LGBTQ people. All of this has caused me to think a lot about my friend Ann. From West Virginia Public Broadcasting and PRX, this is Us and Them, the podcast where we tell stories about America's culture divides. I'm Trey Kay. In the fall of 2014, I first heard about this transgendered woman in Charleston, West Virginia. Ann Kelly Skinner, formerly Greg Skinner, was in the process of transitioning from male to female. The story was that Ann had been forced out of the closet for political reasons. Ann's a lawyer, and her wife, now ex-wife, is a judge. And this whole malicious whisper campaign about Ann's gender status was making its way around the legal community in Charleston. I was intrigued, and I got in touch with her. But we didn't end up talking about any of that stuff. What we ended up talking about was how Ann talks.
Hello, Trey. This is Ann Kelly, and I received your Facebook message and the introduction from DL, and I'm giving you a call. My number is 304.
This was the first voicemail message Ann left for me. And then immediately afterwards, she sent me a spirally apologetic email, the kind that makes you think, I have no idea what you're talking about. She was apologizing for the quality of her voice. Her Femme voice, as she called it. She wrote, "It was cold out. I was really tired to begin with. My Femme voice was shot to hell from overuse lately. And due to the earbuds I was wearing, I realized I could not hear the quality, or lack thereof, of my voice. The interesting part is that I damn near panicked and froze up in mid-sentence, which was a first for me."
Excuse me. The reality of folks' lives is typically that your voice is your voice is your voice, right? At least it's your voice until all of a sudden it's all wrong. And then it becomes something else entirely different altogether.
Something that she needs to conquer, like a little traitor in her throat, giving her away. Raising the pitch of your voice can be a huge ordeal for male to female transsexuals. There's a whole episode of the Caitlyn Jenner reality show, I Am Kate, devoted to her struggles with her voice. And at some level, I understood why it's so important, and on some level, I didn't. At the very least, I didn't understand why Ann worried about what she sounded like to me. Oh, and as you'll discover shortly, there might be some language that some might find offensive. Who gives a shit what I think?
Yeah, I know, right? Who really should? No one really. But, the reality is people make these judgments because my natural voice it doesn't cut it. In a perfect world, yeah, I would use my real voice, but I'm going to be treated in a way that's going to make it difficult.
It would be one thing if Ann planned to live her life as a trans woman, but that's not what she wants to do. She wants to live her life as a woman without any prefixes, which was especially difficult when we first met because she was living part-time as a man, as Greg Skinner. In a way, her story embodies the three literary conflicts she learned about in high school: man versus nature, man versus society, and in this case, man versus herself.
I've worked really hard on this. I've worked really hard on my body. I've worked really hard to be comfortable with myself. And I've worked really, really hard to like myself. And so, I want to be taken seriously.
I first sat down with Ann in January 2015. She was wearing a plum-colored sweater and light blue jeans tucked into knee-high boots. By that point, she'd been through a lot. She'd spent years hiding her feelings that she was a woman, felt ashamed, attempted suicide once. Then, after finally accepting who she was, she literally worked her butt off changing her body. She took hormones and shed 50 pounds off her big, bulky dude frame. Ann is 6'4". So her height plus the way she sounds is sort of a double strike against her femininity. After successfully changing her body through sheer force of will, she set about doing the same thing to her voice.
Okay, so this is taking a recording of my voice, presumably, and hopefully...
Her main strategy was to get in the car and record voice memos of herself. She sent me 37 recordings that she made over the course of 3 months.
I'm trying to practice so that I don't sound like a complete and total male. Okay, I'm gonna listen to it.
She'd stop recording, go back, listen to it, and then start recording again, over and over and over.
Okay, here's my new voice memo. And I would just talk and talk and talk. If I saw like a sign on the side of the road, or if a truck passed me, I would describe the truck or the license plate. Or if somebody was driving too slow in front of me and I wanted to pass them but I couldn't get around them, I would talk about them and my displeasure of not being able to get around them in my voice that I was practicing. So I will pass this slow cocksucker and it'll all be good. And
it's not like Ann is that much different of a person than Greg was.
This is Ann's best friend, Dan Radmacher. They've been friends for 15 years.
It's funny because as we got to know her as Ann and hang out with her, my wife and I would talk about it, after she left, and would say, she's really pulling it off, except for the voice. And especially after she's had a beer or two, or 3 or 4, it's like the voice gets deeper and louder.
Dan has a pretty pivotal supporting role in the story of Ann's transition and her voice. He's one of the first people Ann came out to, and he's the first to hear her Femme voice live and in person. It was spring 2014. Ann had driven down to visit Dan in Roanoke and to attend her first transgendered support group meeting down there. She showed up as Greg, then changed into a multicolored blouse accented with drop earrings. When she came back downstairs, the first words she spoke to Dan as Ann were, "I need another beer."
I felt really silly because I had known him for so long and I had talked to him in my Greg voice. I mean, that's what he knew and that's what I knew and that's how we just talked. And all of a sudden, I'm changing everything. It was also much harder to do than I thought because I was focusing so much on my voice that I wasn't really hearing what he was saying. And I found myself having to say, "I'm sorry, what was the question again?" And he had to repeat himself a lot.
I was like, okay, I'm just not going to say anything. Because why bother? I remember one time in particular after a visit, Shannon and I were talking about it. I was like, well, what do we say to her? How do we, can we say something to her? Should we say something to her? And I got a text from Ann minutes later saying, I want to ask you about my voice. I was like, oh, thank God.
I want to keep it up, but I don't know if I can do that.
Just recently, she sent me a few sound files. And again, we've got the kind of relationship where I could say, you're sounding a little bit like Julia Childs.
Something in making it a little more throaty. This voice, at least in my head, it sounds really bad. And it just sounds totally, hopelessly ridiculous.
The Julia Child thing, it's actually something Ann picked up in researching how trans women feminize their voices. A common technique that male to female transsexuals use. They start with an absurdly high Minnie Mouse voice, then try to bring it down to a pitch that sounds more realistically feminine. And as with everything else you want to learn, there are scads of tutorials on YouTube about this.
So if I go all the way up to here, and then I slowly drop it until I find like a comfortable position.
Start down here, bring it up into a falsetto, pinch it in, and then bring it back down.
You want to feel a slight vibration, but definitely more in the front area, not in the back of your throat.
Now after that, grab a damn book.
Get a book and read it.
And every night I would read the book as loud as I can in my most highest pitch. It was super annoying. But
yeah, seeing videos like that, Excuse me. Okay, see, wow. Right there is a very good example of needing to reset my voice. In any event,
What do you mean?
yeah, I just needed to clear my voice, and apparently I still do. And you can hear how I'm kind of, struggling to keep the deep masculine sound, rumbling sound out of it. And I think that I'm doing that because I'm conscious of sitting here with you, and I don't want, if I were just by myself, I'd just let it all out, I guess.
Or maybe if she were talking to Dan.
I don't know that I've said this to her, but I want her to feel free to do what's easiest when she's talking with me. I mean, I think I had at one point I did say something like, if your voice is tired and it's easier for you just to let it go, let it go.
But for Ann to talk like Greg isn't easy or comfortable these days. Just like it isn't comfortable to dress like Greg when she goes to her daughter's basketball game and pretends to be like all the other dads on the sidelines. Just like it was never comfortable to be Greg in the first place.
I'm kind of smiling right now because what I'm about to do, it makes me feel really uncomfortable and kind of gross, like kind of icky. But if I were to just use my real, quote unquote, real voice that I was born with, and I'm walking around, it's hard for me to just revert back. But I can't just go around, can't go around day to day sounding like this. I can't go just saying, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing in my dude voice, and just have people look at me and say, oh, you're a woman, you're going to be taken seriously, even though you have this really deep voice, this very obviously masculine voice.
Perhaps you're hearing what I'm hearing right now, which is nothing. No difference really between Ann's femme voice and her dude voice. After years of hormone therapy and trying to sound as feminine as possible, her dude voice is still a lot softer than it used to be. But if you want to know what Ann used to sound like, what her voice was like before the hormones, when she was purely physically Greg, here it is.
Final check, baby. And then it's on. Game on. No. Yeah.
This is a home movie Ann came across when she was cleaning out her house after the divorce. She, or rather he back then, Greg, was with his daughter at an amusement park, psyching her up for one of the rides.
All right, they're closing the gates. There you go. They're closing the gates.
Thumbs up.
Thumbs are up. It's a countdown. Look at Madison.
Well, one thing to get into, and I don't know how much Ann talked with you about this.
Again, this is Ann's good buddy, Dan.
A good part of our relationship was nothing but voice.
What he means is when Ann was Greg, he and Dan would mostly hang out playing those multiplayer online video games. The kind where you wear a headset and talk to each other while you're in different locations. The games themselves were intensely violent, shoot-'em-up war games, and they spent an inordinate amount of time trying to kill each other. And not to put too fine a point on it, this was a very dude-bro relationship. They talk a lot of smack in very un-PC ways, like when Dan's character in the game would get into a tight spot that he couldn't get out of.
I would kind of end up essentially cowering in this corner, afraid to take a step, and I would hear this in my ear, "Pussy, pussy."
But apart from that, they really connected during these gaming sessions, would have real conversations about their personal lives and give each other advice. Dan confided in Greg when his second marriage was falling apart. In fact, it was over those headsets that Greg came out to Dan.
So, in some ways, the voice is very hard for me. I really enjoyed those conversations, and it was a release, and we'd laugh and we'd talk, and Greg had this booming voice and this even boomier laugh. And I just remember thinking, well, is that going to go away?
And within that question, is that going to go away?
This is my co-producer, Sean Cole.
Is there another question that's like, am I going to lose my best friend?
Yeah, that was definitely in there. And I remember, and this is something I'm really not proud of, but not long after she came out to me, I was talking with a mutual friend who she had told, and we were, just kind of talking over the consequences and trying to figure out amongst ourselves what this meant. And I was like, I wish I could tell Greg that, I'm fine with this, but I just really want to know Greg, and I don't know that I want to get to know this other person. And I think I even used a not nice term.
Can you say what one?
Oh, I think I said something like, I wonder if he could just leave the bitch out of it. Like I said, I'm really not proud of that, but I'm dealing with this in my own way, and I think I've come a long way since then. I kind of had that realization that, going out, despite, the public attention it might bring and kind of the unwanted staring, was just more comfortable and authentic. And it would be like if society's expectations were that I should go out in a dress, and if I didn't, then people were going to stare and, oh, look at the beard and, whatever. I would want to go out like me.
I would too. And I'd want to sound like me. Coming up, will Anne's progress with her voice affect her prospects with dating, or perhaps finding a life partner?
If a certain percentage of those people are just all of a sudden going to be removed from the pool just because I have a voice that betrays that I was born as a genetic male, well, that's a pretty crappy deal for me.
I'm Trey Kay, and this is Us and Them, which is supported in part by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation.
Music lifts us up and brings us together, even when we can't get together in person. Mountain Stage brings you live performances on the air, online, and in our podcast. They remind you how it feels to be in a live audience listening to live music. This is Larry Gross, host of Mountain Stage. Find a link to our stations and our podcast online at mountainstage.org.
After those first interviews with Anne, I didn't see her for about 6 months, and a lot changed during that time, mainly with her body. She'd gotten breast implants and undergone facial feminization surgery. She'd done about everything except the surgery that would transform her genitals. She had also moved from West Virginia to Florida, hoping to start all over again in a place that was less judgmental, and that didn't originally know her as Greg Skinner. But the biggest change was that there was no Greg Skinner anymore. Now Anne was living full-time as a woman. When I saw Anne again, she looked more feminine. But more than that, she seemed so much more relaxed and comfortable in her own skin. It was summer. She was wearing cut-off shorts, a colorful t-shirt, and flip-flops. Not much makeup. It was like she didn't have to stretch quite so much to present as the woman that she always felt she was. And her voice?
Yeah.
Sounded exactly the same.
So the goal of this exercise and this warm-up exercise
She had still been working on it. She showed Sean and me these apps on her phone that helped her practice. One of them drew a descending line on the screen that matched her pitch.
Then I cracked there at the end, and you can see where it just dropped on the frequency line that it was recording.
Another app actually shows her what frequency she's speaking at, measured in hertz.
Yeah, right now it's hovering in the upper 90s to like a little bit over 100, occasionally over 110 or 120.
Sean leaned in closer to the phone.
I'm sorry, I'm just crazily curious as to if I talk to it, hello, 1, 2, 3, good morning, and it's going from like 84, 78, 104, 93, 83.
That is about the same pitch as Anne's. Then again, sometimes when Sean calls the cable company, they refer to him as Madam.
Anyway, the fact that Anne's voice still sounds so manly after all this time and after all the work she's put in. She says there's been a lot of days where she just throws up her hands.
And particularly when I've listened to like newer recordings of my voice and compared them to older ones, and it's still around the same pitch level, I've been like, fuck, I can't, this just sucks. And it's really discouraging. And I'll also admit, it's those moments, particularly when they're really just bad moments, I'll just put my phone away and just not do it for like a week or two because I'm just disgusted by it.
But that's harder to do now that Anne is living as a woman full time. Back when she had to switch back and forth between being a woman and being a man, it made sense to put the phone down here and there and take a break.
I could remove myself from it just by the reality of my situation. Now,
It's like you could escape into Greg a little bit.
Right, I could. But now, if I allow myself to get too discouraged with my voice, what's my alternative? I just stop talking altogether to people? I mean, I can't do that.
I asked Anne point blank if the physical part is all where she wants it to be, but the voice isn't up to her standards, is it possible to feel like a woman? And she told me this story. She said there was this one time when she was with Dan, waiting in line at a food festival, and this guy walked up, clearly interested in her. The guy started flirting with her a little and says something like, "My, you're tall. How tall are you?" And Anne opened her mouth and said, 6'4". And at the sound of Anne's voice, all the interest drained out of this guy's face, and he walked away. She says that's happened more than once.
If a certain percentage of those people are just all of a sudden going to be removed from the pool just because I have a voice that betrays that I was born as a genetic male, well, that's a pretty crappy deal for me.
Well, but hang on a second, because it's not just the voice giving it away. I mean, eventually I would imagine if you have an intimate partner, you would let them know that.
That's a tough one because, well, certain body parts that are going to be different, yeah, at some point, you're going to have to tell. And if you don't, it's going to be discovered. And that's kind of like a betrayal of trust, maybe. And
Or definitely.
Yeah. And yeah, that's true. We have to act in a way that's respectful to everybody. But if you've had all of the surgeries and you are at some point female, you have a vagina and all of that, I think it would be really awkward. Somebody asks you out, and then the first thing that you respond is, before I answer, I used to have a dude's body. I mean, no, that's unreasonable.
For the record, as a trans woman, you can't be a candidate for sexual reassignment surgery until you've lived full-time as a woman for a year. Anne has a date set for her operation in Bangkok this March. Also for the record, getting that operation will not do anything to change Anne's voice. That ship sailed when she went through puberty as a boy. There is surgery you can get on your vocal cords, but it's risky. Sometimes it works, sometimes it has no effect, and sometimes you can lose your voice entirely. And obviously, this do-it-yourself method of Anne's wasn't really doing much.
It needs directed professional work, and I admit that now. That's why, I'm going forward with using the services of a professional, because I haven't been able to get there on my own.
Hello. Oh my gosh.
Hello.
How are you? Nice
Doing
to meet you,
well.
Anne.
Yes.
Come in here.
Unbeknownst to me, before this second interview with Anne, she had already made an appointment with a speech pathologist and voice coach in Florida named Dr. Karen Wicklund.
So then you can just situate yourself right here, Anne, on this chair, and I'll get you a cup of tea. Got some tea going.
Dr. Wicklund works out of her house. There's a grand piano in the dining room where the table usually goes, anatomical drawings on the walls. She works with singers and people with voice disorders, and she has about 100 transgender clients, mostly male to female. This first session was Anne's evaluation, just to see what they were working with. Dr. Wicklund asked some basic medical questions first, and then, just as an example of what can happen, she played Anne a recording of another client's progress.
And this is a client that also is around a baritone, sort of around the same pitch area you are. All right, here's where she has an evaluation.
When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors.
So how would you gender that voice?
As male.
Okay. This is about after 4 sessions of training.
Next, are you ready? Okay. When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors. These take the shape of a long, round arch.
Then, this was after 9 sessions.
When it strikes raindrops in the air, they act as a prism and form a rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors.
That is amazing.
These take the shape of a round, long arch.
That's absolutely amazing.
And its 2 ends apparently beyond the horizon. There is, according to legend, a boiling pot of gold at one end.
Wow.
No one ever finds it. When a man looks for something beyond his reach, his friends say he's looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
That's something.
I'm actually tearing up here. Oh my God, that is amazing.
Well, I have to tell you as a disclaimer, not necessarily all of my clients
I know.
can get there, but it's possible.
Yes.
Wicklund usually does between 8 and 16 sessions with trans clients like Anne. The training actually teaches them to stretch their vocal cords, physically stretch them. You can think of it like elongating a rubber band and plucking it as it gets longer and longer. The tone gets higher and higher. In the beginning, she tells her clients to talk softly, like they're telling a secret, and to use more breath, which makes the vocal cords easier to stretch.
I'll say, why?
Why?
Why won't you whisper?
Why won't you whisper?
Yeah. So again, we're sort of singing it a little bit or sort of chanting it, but we're
Yeah.
getting it in that range. And so what happens if you use
I have to confess, from the very beginning, even listening to Anne do these workouts, I had doubts that she'd ever sound like she wanted to sound. I felt like there was about as much chance of her feminizing her voice as there was of me feminizing mine. But according to Dr. Wicklund, Anne's voice isn't especially low or hard to work with. In fact, she's had trans clients whose voices are lower than Anne's, she says. And that as long as Anne stays motivated and does what Dr. Wicklund says, she'll definitely improve.
Wheel.
Wheel.
Can you hear the pitch? Wheel.
Wheel.
Better. Whenever.
Whenever.
Can you hum that for me? Whenever.
Whenever.
Can you feel my belly going? Whenever.
I think there's always going to be, a part of me that misses Greg.
Again, this is Anne's best friend, Dan.
Wishes things were the way they were. But
And I wonder if once she finally gets the voice right, and completes the transition, if like there'll be another kind of mourning process, because then Greg is really gone.
Yeah, I think there probably will be, though I'll be very happy for her. One, I think she will get it right. She's put so much effort into what she's been doing that I can't see her not putting the effort in to make this work. Mm-hmm. And I think it'll be more comfortable for me when it's more comfortable for her, and when it sounds more genuine.
Okay, see you next week.
Okay, bye-bye.
I feel really good. I mean, that was really exciting. I have goosebumps. I actually have goosebumps.
This is what Anne's voice sounded like right after she left her first evaluation with Dr. Wicklund.
Everything has been so hard and just so seemingly impossible. I didn't want to have my hopes too high, and I kind of felt like I was almost preparing myself for disappointment, but no disappointment at all.
And this is what it sounded like after 7 sessions. Dr. Wicklund sent us this recording.
The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors. These take the shape of a long round arch with its path high above and its 2 ends apparently beyond the horizon. There is, according to legend, a boiling pot of gold at one end. People look, but no one ever finds it. When a man looks for something beyond his reach, his friends say he is looking for the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
Anne Kelly Skinner is living in Florida, and she still works with Dr. Wicklund to improve her voice. She frequently gets back to West Virginia to spend time with her daughter and friends like Dan. And the big new development? Anne recently let me know that she's really excited about her new girlfriend, Rachel.
In an upcoming episode, we're going to check in with Anne Kelly. She has had her surgery and is living fully as a woman. If you have any questions that you'd like me to ask her, contact me through our Facebook page or Twitter @UsThemPodcast, or via email, trey@usandthempodcast.com. You can find all of these channels at our website, usandthempodcast.com.
Whenever a new movie is in the area, Marvin is usually an early arrival. Nearly all evening, Marvin is in row 1, and I really tensed up and just...
Yeah, well, you don't worry about it. If you miss a word or something, it's no big deal.
I mean, I tensed my body up. I could feel myself clenching, and...
You've been listening to Us and Them. Huge thanks to Sean Cole for co-producing this piece with me, Trey K, and to Mitch Hanley for mixing it and making it sound so pretty. Michael Lipton and Tristan Lozow wrote and performed the Us and Them show music. Mark Lerner designed our logo. Rita Krisofi and Mariana Trofimova designed our website at usandthempodcast.com and provide us with images for the web. Our interns are Nicholas Tantillo and Sofia Tedesco. The wonderful people at PRX and West Virginia Public Broadcasting make Us and Them possible. So do grants from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, the National Endowment for the Humanities, the West Virginia Humanities Council, the CRC Foundation, and the Daywood Foundation. We'll see you next time on Us and Them.
Support for this podcast comes from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.